Welcome to Martha Family Secrets Stories. You know that moment when someone says something to you that becomes a part of your DNA? When a sentence gets lodged so deep inside your mind that it shapes how you see yourself for decades.
Yeah,
I had one of those moments. I was 14 years old, sitting on a cold bathroom floor, pressing a wet washcloth against my ribs, and my mother whispered something that I would spend the next 18 years believing. You know how to push his buttons. That's it. That's the sentence that rewrote my entire childhood. Not, are you okay? Not, he had no right to do that. Just you know how to push his buttons. Like the bruises were something I'd chosen. Like the pain was a natural consequence of my own carelessness. Like I was the problem. For 18 years, every single time my father hit me, my mother would wait until he left the room. And then she'd say some version of that same line. Sometimes it was gentler. Sometimes it was harsher. But it was always the same message. This is your fault. And I believed her. I internalized it. I spent my entire childhood thinking that if I could just be quieter, softer, more careful, if I could just figure out which button not to push, everything would be okay. Everything would be normal. Everything would stop hurting. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. My name is Sarah. I'm 25 years old now. I'm a nurse at a community hospital in a small Midwestern town, and I'm finally telling you the story that I've been carrying alone for far too long. This isn't just about what happened to me. This is about what didn't happen. About silence. About the person who should have protected me but chose to stay quiet instead. And about what happens when you finally decide that silence is no longer an option. The day I moved out of my family home, I called my mother. I was done. I was finished. I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. And do you know what she said to me? Do you know the first thing that came out of her mouth? You're destroying this family. I remember standing in an empty apartment with 2 suitcases and a trash bag full of everything I owned, holding a phone to my ear, and having to choose between screaming and crying. So I did neither. Instead, I said something that surprised both of us. You watched him destroy me for 18 years and said nothing. And then I hung up the phone. 6 months of silence followed that call. Not a text. Not an email. Not a single word from my mother. 6 months of me rebuilding myself in a studio apartment with IKEA furniture and the kind of quiet that comes from being finally safe. 6 months of me starting nursing school, working double shifts, and learning what it felt like to make my own decisions about my own body without anyone controlling the outcome. And then, at 11 o'clock at night on a random Tuesday in October, my phone rang. It was my mother. But she didn't sound like herself. She sounded broken. She sounded raw. She sounded like someone whose entire world had just collapsed. And she told me something that I never thought I would hear from her. Something that changed everything. Rehook, but before I tell you what she said, you need to understand where this all started. You need to see the house. You need to meet my father. You need to understand how a man can spend 30 years building the perfect image while destroying everything behind closed doors. And how one woman can become so afraid that she forgets how to see her own child. If you'd driven past our house on Elmwood Avenue on any given day, you would have seen the American dream. A beautiful colonial with black shutters, a lawn so perfectly maintained it looked like it was mowed with a ruler. Because honestly, it probably was. My father was the kind of man who measured everything. The grass. The shrubs. The angles of the walkway. And eventually, he started measuring us. My father's name was Marcus. Marcus Sullivan. And he was a deacon at Grace Baptist Church. He owned a construction company with about 15 employees, mostly commercial renovations and city contracts. He coached Little League for a few years, not because he loved baseball, but because the people sitting in those bleachers were the same people who sat on the town zoning board. Everything Marcus did had an audience. Every audience had a purpose. My mother was Catherine. Catherine Sullivan. She was the woman who showed up to every church potluck with a warm casserole and a cardigan buttoned all the way to her neck. Hair always pinned. Smile always soft. Voice always low. She called every man sir and every woman sweetheart. And if you'd asked anyone in town to describe her, they would have said, devoted wife, good Christian woman, such a blessing to have in our community. And then there was me, Sarah. The quiet girl in the third pew every Sunday, sitting between my parents with my hands folded on my lap, wearing long sleeves even in the middle of July. Nobody asked why. Not once. Not the Sunday school teachers. Not the neighbors. Not the women who told my mother what a beautiful family she had. Nobody looked past the flag on the porch. Nobody questioned the perfect lawn. Nobody examined the handshake my father gave them. That firm, measured handshake that was designed to make men respect him and women trust him. If you'd driven past our house, you would have been completely and utterly wrong about us. Everyone was. The first time I remember it clearly, I was 10 years old. I'd forgotten to wash the dishes after dinner. Not refused. Forgotten. I was sitting at the kitchen table doing my homework while the plates were still piling up in the sink. My father came back from the garage, and that's when everything changed. He didn't yell. That's what people never understand about my father. Marcus Sullivan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He pulled his chair back from the table slowly. Deliberately. He set both his hands flat on the wood. And he said something in that low, even tone that still makes my spine lock up when I remember it. Come here. I went. A 10-year-old girl, I had no idea what was about to happen. I had no framework for what was about to happen. My brother, Tommy, was 4 at the time. He was in the living room watching cartoons while everything went wrong in a back bedroom. I won't describe what happened behind that closed door. I don't need to. But I'll tell you what I remember most. It wasn't the pain. It was what came after. My mother walked into my room maybe 20 minutes later after my father's truck pulled out of the driveway. She sat on the edge of my bed. She didn't look at the bruises that were already blooming across my ribs. She looked at my face. And she whispered, you know, Daddy doesn't like dirty dishes. Why do you keep pushing him like that? Like I'd pressed a button. Like what had just happened to my body was a natural consequence of my own carelessness. I was 10 years old. By the time I was 14, I'd been to the emergency room 3 times. Each visit had the exact same script. My mother would drive. My father would come along. Calm. Concerned. His hand resting on my shoulder like some kind of father in a commercial. And he'd tell the intake nurse that I was just so clumsy. Always running around. Never looking where I was going. And my mother would laugh. That soft, practiced laugh. And the nurse would smile back. Because why wouldn't she? The man standing next to us was a church deacon. He smelled like Old Spice and fresh sawdust. He looked like he coached Little League. But on the 3rd visit, something different happened. The doctor paused. She looked at my arm. She looked at my chart. She looked at me. And I could feel her question before she asked it. Is someone hurting you? And that's when everything shifted. That's when the story started, not in my family home, but in a hospital record system. That's when the truth started being documented, even though nobody knew it yet. The doctor asked me if someone was hurting me. I remember my father's hand tightening on my shoulder. Not hard enough for the doctor to see. Just hard enough for me to feel it. A warning? She fell down the stairs again, my father said smoothly. And then he smiled. That perfect, practiced smile. I keep telling her, no running in socks. The doctor wrote something in my chart. For years, I didn't know what. But I found out eventually. Years and years later, when I was old enough and brave enough to ask for my own medical records, I learned what she'd written. Recurrent injuries inconsistent with stated mechanism. Recommend CPS follow-up. But CPS never came. Not to our house. Not to the perfect colonial on Elmwood Avenue with the perfectly mowed lawn. Because this was a small town. Because my father had shaken hands with everyone from the fire chief to the county clerk. Because in a town where everyone knows everyone, reputation is everything. And Marcus Sullivan had spent 30 years building his. At 16, I got a part-time job at the pharmacy on Grant Street. I didn't ask my father's permission. I asked my school counselor to sign the work permit, told him it was for college savings, and started bagging prescriptions 3 afternoons a week at $9.25 an hour. My father found out within a week. Because of course he did. And when he found out, he didn't like it. Not because he cared about my schedule. Not because he was worried about my grades. He didn't like it because a girl with her own paycheck is a girl with options. And Marcus Sullivan did not raise his children to have options he didn't control. No daughter of mine needs to work, he said at dinner. His voice was pleasant. But his eyes weren't. People will think I can't provide. So I kept the job. And I kept every single dollar in a shoebox under my bed, tucked behind a stack of old textbooks. By the end of 6 months, I had $412. Enough for a security deposit on the smallest apartment in the county. If I ever needed it. My mother saw that shoebox once. I came home and found her standing in my room, staring at it on my desk like it was a grenade. A bomb waiting to explode. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me with this expression I couldn't decode. Part fear. Part something else. Part envy, maybe. Or recognition. Like she was looking at a version of herself that had made a different choice at 22. Then my father found it. He took every dollar. He counted it at the kitchen table in front of me. Every bill. Every coin. He folded the money into his wallet and said something that I'll never forget. Money earned under my roof belongs to this household. I didn't cry that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and I made a decision. I started hiding cash inside a tampon box in the bathroom cabinet. I started counting days. I started making a plan that only I knew about. At 17, I had saved enough. Enough for a deposit. Enough for first month's rent on a studio apartment 2 towns over. I'd been accepted into a nursing program at the community college. I applied without telling anyone. Used the school library computer. Had the acceptance letter sent to a P.O. box I'd rented for $11 a month. But mail is a fragile thing in a house where one person controls everything. The day the second copy of my financial aid summary arrived. The one I'd accidentally had sent to the house. My father was the one who opened the mailbox. He brought the envelope to dinner. Set it next to the salt shaker. Didn't mention it until we were all seated. Forks in hand. Steam rising from the mashed potatoes my mother had spent an hour preparing. "What's this?" he asked. His voice was conversational. Almost curious. I looked at the envelope and felt my stomach drop into my feet. "It's mine," I said. He opened it slowly. "Read it." Then he looked at me with an expression that was somehow worse than anger. And he said, "You think you're leaving? Nobody in this family makes a decision without going through me." He tore the letter slowly. One clean rip down the middle. Then another. 4 pieces laid neatly beside his plate like a place setting. My mother cut her meat. Tommy, 11, small for his age, stared at his plate. Nobody spoke. After dinner, I went to my room and called the admissions office from under my blanket. Whispered into the phone. Explained that the original was damaged. The woman on the other end paused, then gently asked for whatever address I'd like to use. I gave her the P.O. box number. And that's when I knew for certain. I was leaving on my 18th birthday. No matter what. My 18th birthday was on a Tuesday. My father was at a job site. A commercial renovation 40 minutes away. I checked his schedule the night before. He wouldn't be back until 6. My mother was in the kitchen. I had 2 suitcases, a backpack, and my friend Rachel's Honda idling at the curb. I carried the first suitcase down the stairs, and my mother didn't turn around. She was standing at the counter, her back to me, washing a dish that was already clean. A dish she'd probably washed 3 times that day. A dish that didn't need washing. "If you leave," she said, "who's going to help me with dinner?" It wasn't really about dinner. I know that now. It was the only way Catherine Sullivan knew how to say, "Please don't go," without admitting why she needed me to stay. If I was in the house, I was the lightning rod. If I left, the lightning would have to land somewhere else. And she wasn't brave enough to face that. I set the suitcase by the door and walked to Tommy's room. He was sitting on his bed, 12 years old, trying not to cry. I knelt in front of him and held both his hands. "I'm going to come back for you," I said. "I promise." He nodded. He didn't ask me to stay. Even at 12, he understood that staying meant something worse than missing me. I hugged him. I picked up my bags. I walked to the front door. My mother never turned around. But when I got to Rachel's car and looked back at the house just once, I saw her. Standing behind the living room curtain. One hand pressed flat against the glass, watching. For 1 second, the curtain stayed open. Then it fell. That was the last time I saw my mother for 6 months. 3 weeks after I left, I was sitting on the floor of my studio apartment. Mattress on the ground. 1 lamp from Goodwill. Curtains I'd bought at the IKEA clearance rack for $7. And for the first time in my life, I noticed something. Silence. Not the kind of silence that comes before a door slams. Not the kind that makes your stomach tight and your shoulders tense. The kind that just exists. Peaceful. Ordinary. Safe. Then my phone rang. My mother's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. But some part of me, the part that had spent 18 years hoping she'd choose me, picked up. She didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask about the apartment or the job or the nursing program. She went straight to it. "Your father isn't eating," she said. "He's not sleeping. The house feels wrong without you." A pause. "You're destroying this family, Sarah. Do you know what people at church are saying?" I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger exactly. Something quieter. Clarity. "You watched him destroy me for 18 years, I said, and said nothing. "Don't call me to say I'm the one breaking things." Silence. Not the good kind. Then a click. She hung up. I set the phone on the floor beside me and leaned my head against the wall. Stared at the water stain on the ceiling. It looked like a map of somewhere I'd never been. I didn't cry. I think I'd used up all my crying somewhere between age 10 and 17. And there was nothing left. Just a hollow, ringing quiet. I thought she'd call back. That night. The next day. That week. She didn't. 6 months of nothing. 0 contact. I finished my first year of nursing school with a 3.7 GPA and a permanent knot between my shoulder blades from working double shifts at the nursing home on Route 9. My apartment was small, but clean. A succulent on the windowsill. A secondhand bookshelf. Scrubs drying on a rack by the radiator. Every object in that room was something I'd chosen. And that made it more mine than any bedroom I'd ever had on Elmwood Avenue. I tried to call Tommy 3 times. Each time, it went to voicemail. The 4th time, a text came back from my father's number. "Stop calling this phone." He'd taken Tommy's cell. Of course he had. You can't control a boy if his sister keeps reminding him there's a world outside the house. At night alone, I'd lie in bed and think, is he okay? Is Tommy sitting in that room right now, counting the cracks on the ceiling the way I used to? And then the harder question. The one that sat on my chest like a stone. Did I abandon him? I was alone in that apartment, rebuilding myself piece by piece, when something happened. Something that would force me to go back. Something that would make me realize that my silence, my absence, had consequences too. And my brother was paying the price for my escape. One evening I was scrolling through Facebook, something I rarely did, and I saw the Grace Baptist Church page. A photo of my father grinning wide, arm around Pastor David, standing in front of a banner I had to read twice to believe. 2025 Man of the Year nominee. Marcus Sullivan. Below the photo, a comment from my mother's account. So proud of this man and this family. God is good. The family in that photo was 3 people. I'd been cropped out. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I closed the app, turned off the light, and lay in the dark. And then at 11 o'clock at night in mid-October, my phone rang. I almost didn't recognize her voice at first. Not because it had changed, but because I never heard my mother cry. Not like this. Not raw. Not uncontrolled. The kind of sound that comes out when you've held something inside so long it breaks the container. "Sarah," she said. Her voice cracked on the second syllable. "Sarah, please don't hang up." I didn't speak. I just held the phone. "He started hitting Tommy," she said. The room tilted. I pressed my hand flat against the mattress to steady myself like the floor might actually move. "When?" I asked. "After you left." Slowly at first. Shoving. Grabbing. Tommy talked back about going to prom with his friends. "Your father." She couldn't finish the sentence. She tried again. "He hit him, Sarah. Hard. Like he used to. Like he used to hit you." Weeping came then. Not from me. From her. From my mother. Raw and broken and uncontrolled. And then she said the thing. The sentence I had replayed 1,000 times since I left. The one I never in my life expected to hear from Catherine Sullivan. I recorded it on my old phone. I have the audio. His voice. What he said. All of it. She paused, breathing heavily on the other end. "Sarah, I was wrong about everything. About all of it. I'm so sorry." I sat on the edge of my mattress in the dark and I felt something crack open inside me that I thought had healed shut years ago. Not forgiveness. I wasn't there yet. Not relief. Something more complicated. Like watching someone you'd given up on take one single step in the right direction and not knowing whether to feel hope or grief for the 18 years of steps that never came. "Send me the file," I said. "Tonight. And don't delete it." She sent it at 11:47 p.m. 4 minutes and 22 seconds long. I moved fast after that. The next morning, I called a legal aid office 2 counties over. Far enough that nobody would know my family name. An attorney named Janet listened without interrupting, then said something that changed my perspective on everything. "You have options," she said, "but your father has a head start on the narrative. And in small towns, narrative is everything." She was right. Because while I was making phone calls and researching restraining orders, Marcus was doing what Marcus does best. Managing the story. Controlling the narrative. Building his version of events brick by careful brick. Within a week, the version of events circulating through Grace Baptist Church went like this. Sarah Sullivan, troubled since adolescence. Possibly using substances. Mentally unstable. Trying to tear apart a God-fearing family for reasons no one could quite explain. Marcus had told Pastor David in private, voice heavy with fatherly concern, that he'd tried everything. That he prayed for me every night. That he feared I was going down a dangerous path. Pastor David called me to check in. His tone was careful. Pastoral. But I could hear the shape of my father's words underneath his questions. Your father says you've been going through a hard time, Sarah. Is there anything the church can do? It spread beyond the church. A coworker at the hospital, a woman I barely knew, stopped me in the break room. "Hey, I heard you're dealing with some family stuff. You okay?" Someone mentioned. She trailed off, embarrassed. In a town of 14,000 people, reputation moves faster than truth. And my father had spent 30 years building his brick by careful brick. 2 days before the Man of the Year ceremony, Marcus threw a barbecue. I heard about it from Tommy, who whispered into his friend's phone from the backyard while my father stood at the grill holding court. "He's telling everyone you're coming home," Tommy whispered. "He keeps saying, my daughter's finally coming back. Thank the Lord." They're all congratulating him. That night, I opened Facebook. The Grace Baptist Church page had a new post. A family photo from 8 years ago. Me at 16. Tommy at 10. My mother in the middle. My father's arm around all of us. Everyone smiling. The caption read, "Family is everything through thick and thin. God is good." 87 likes. 22 comments. Hearts. Prayer emojis. Marcus had invited me to his Man of the Year ceremony. He wanted me on that stage. He wanted me to be part of his redemption story. He didn't know that I was bringing my own script. The night before the ceremony, I almost didn't go through with it. I sat at my kitchen table at midnight, staring at the records I'd requested. 5. Visits typed out in clinical language. Dates. Descriptions. The doctor's careful notations. Next to them, my phone loaded with 4 minutes and 22 seconds of my father's voice doing exactly what he'd done my entire childhood. Only this time to his son. And I thought, what if I'm wrong? Not wrong about the facts. Those were printed in black and white. But wrong about the outcome. What if I stood up in that room and 200 people looked at me the way they'd looked at me my whole life, like I was the problem? My phone buzzed. Tommy, calling from his friend's phone again. "Meg," his voice was barely a whisper. "Dad made me try on the suit tonight. He said if I say one wrong word tomorrow, he's pulling every dollar from the account." A pause. He measured my tie. With a ruler. He actually stood there and measured my tie with a ruler to make sure it was straight. I closed my eyes. "I can't do this anymore," he said. "I can't sit up there and smile. I can't pretend we're okay, because we're not okay." That broke something in me. Hearing my own voice, my own pain, coming out of my little brother's mouth. "You won't have to smile tomorrow," I said. "I promise." I wasn't going to the ceremony for revenge. I was going because I'd made a promise to a 12-year-old boy 6 years ago. And I was not going to break it. The next morning, I laid everything out on my kitchen table. The manila envelope. 5 pages of medical records. Each one stamped with the hospital's seal. Dates ranging from age 9 to 15. Clinical language that said what no one in my family ever would. My phone fully charged. My mother's audio file synced and tested. A small Bluetooth speaker, the portable kind, the size of a coffee cup, tucked into my bag. I called Janet at Legal Aid one last time. If I play a recording that my mother made in her own home in front of a public gathering, and we're a one-party consent state, is it legal? "Your mother made the recording," she said. She consented. It's legal. And if you share your own medical records publicly, they're your records, Sarah. You can do whatever you want with them. I chose my clothes carefully. A plain white button-up shirt. Black slacks. Flat shoes. No jewelry. No makeup beyond what I'd wear to a shift at the hospital. I wanted to look exactly like what I was. A 24-year-old nurse who works 60 hours a week and pays her own rent. Not the troubled daughter my father had described. Not a victim performing grief. Just a woman telling the truth in clean, simple clothes. I called my mother one final time. "Mom, you don't have to say anything. You just have to be there. But if you want to speak, you speak. Her breathing was uneven. Okay, she whispered. I'll try. I hung up knowing that try wasn't a promise. My entire plan depended on a woman who'd spent 28 years learning how to disappear. And I was asking her to be visible. The ceremony started at 6. It was noon. 6 more hours of silence. And then, for the first time, I was going to break it. The fellowship hall at Grace Baptist Church smelled like carnations and lemon polish. Round tables draped in white linen. Paper programs at each seat. Gold lettering. A cross at the top. In the center, Man of the Year award honoring Marcus Sullivan. A podium at the front with a microphone. 2 flower arrangements. A banner that must have cost $300. The banner read, Faith, Family, Service. I almost laughed. 200 people filled the room. Church elders, their wives, families from the congregation, business associates, local officials. The kind of crowd that runs a small town, not by law, but by handshake. My father knew every person in that room. Marcus stood near the front table in a navy suit, red tie, gold cuff links that caught the light when he gestured. Which he did often. Because Marcus Sullivan speaks with his whole body when there's an audience. My mother stood beside him in a pale floral dress, hands clasped in front of her, eyes lowered. Tommy sat stiffly in a chair that looked like it might swallow him, wearing a suit he clearly hadn't picked out. His tie measured to military precision. I walked in at 6:15 alone. Marcus saw me from across the room. His face lit up for the audience's benefit. He crossed the hall with his arms open. There she is, he announced. Everyone, my daughter's here. He hugged me. 200 people watched. A few clapped. I didn't return the hug. I didn't pull away either. I just stood still, arms at my sides, feeling his hands on my back. In my bag, the manila envelope pressed against my hip. At 7 o'clock, Pastor David stepped to the podium. Tonight, we honor a man who has served this church and this community with unwavering dedication. A man of faith. A man of family. A man whose hands have literally built the walls around us. Laughter. Applause. Please welcome our Man of the Year, Marcus Sullivan. Standing ovation. 200 people on their feet. My father walked to the podium the way he walked into every room. Shoulders square. Chin up. Eyes sweeping the crowd like a man surveying land he owned. He gripped the podium and smiled. Thank you, Pastor David. Thank you, Grace Baptist. He paused. Measured. Not because he needed to collect his thoughts, but because he understood that silence creates anticipation. This past year has tested my family. Some of you know my daughter and I had a rough patch. A sympathetic murmur from the crowd. But she's here tonight. That's what family does. We come home. More applause. Then he said it. Sarah, come on up here, sweetheart. Stand with your old man. 200 faces turned to me. The weight of expectation pressed in from every direction. Social. Communal. Religious. If I stayed seated, I was the ungrateful daughter. If I went up and played along, I was his prop. I stood. I picked up my bag. I walked to the stage. Marcus beamed. He put his arm around my shoulder, the same shoulder he'd gripped in the a decade ago, and squeezed. I looked at his hand. Then I reached up and gently moved it off. Not violently. Not dramatically. I just took his hand and placed it back at his side. The room went quiet. And I saw it in his eyes for the first time in my life. Fear. I stepped to the microphone. Thank you, Pastor David, for letting me stand here tonight. My voice was steady. I'd practiced this in my apartment 3 times. Not the words, just the steadiness. My father said tonight that I've been going through a hard time. He's right. I have. But not for the reasons he told you. Marcus moved toward the microphone. Sarah, that's enough. I stepped to the side out of his reach and kept going. I was admitted to the county emergency room 5 times before I turned 16. Every time my parents told the doctors I'd fallen. Every time the medical staff documented something different. I unzipped my bag and pulled out the manila envelope. Set it on the podium. The hospital stamp visible. These are my medical records. My own records. Which I have every legal right to share. They describe, and I'm quoting, recurrent injuries inconsistent with stated mechanism. On one visit, the attending physician recommended a Child Protective Services follow-up. It never happened. Silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind where 200 people realize they're holding their breath. Marcus's face had gone white. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. These records are right here, I said, on this podium. I'm not asking anyone to take my word for it. I'm asking you to read. A woman in the second row pressed her hand to her mouth. An older man I recognized from the deacon board leaned forward in his chair, staring at the podium like he was seeing it for the first time. Marcus found his voice. She's lying. She's been unstable for years. I told you all. I didn't argue. I just opened the envelope and fanned the pages across the podium. Read, I said. Marcus pivoted to Pastor David, who was standing at the side of the stage with his hands frozen at his waist. David, this is a family matter. We don't need to. There's one more thing, I said. I took my phone from my bag and set the Bluetooth speaker on the podium. My hands were calm. I checked the volume twice in the parking lot. I pressed play. The sound that filled the fellowship hall was unmistakable. My father's voice. Not the warm, measured baritone that charmed 200 church members. But the real one. The one that lived behind closed doors. Low. Cold. Absolute. You talk back to me one more time. A sharp sound. Something hitting something. Then Tommy. My brother. 18 years old. Crying out. Sit down. Shut up. In this house, what I say goes. 4 minutes and 22 seconds. The speaker wasn't loud, but in a room that quiet, it didn't need to be. Every word reached every table. Every gasp was audible. A mother near the back pulled her young son closer. One of the deacons, a man who'd been at the barbecue 2 days earlier laughing at Marcus's jokes, stood up and walked out without a word. I stopped the recording. This was recorded by my mother, Catherine Sullivan, in our family home last month. Under Ohio law, she had every right to record it. She was present. She consented. I looked at the room. Some faces were stunned. Some were crying. A few looked angry. One woman near the front was shaking her head slowly over and over like she was trying to unsee something. Marcus gripped the edge of the podium. You can't, that's private. That's my family. It stopped being private, I said, when it left bruises. A chair scraped at the back of the room. My grandmother stood up. 72 years old. Gray cardigan. No-nonsense flats. The kind of woman who irons her napkins and doesn't suffer fools. Dorothy Jennings had tried to save us once before. 16 years ago, when she'd seen the bruises on my arms and called CPS herself. She didn't walk to the stage. She didn't need to. Her voice carried. My name is Dorothy Jennings. I'm Catherine's mother. 16 years ago, I saw bruises on my granddaughter's arms and I called Child Protective Services. Nobody followed up because Marcus Sullivan knows everybody in this town and everybody in this town wanted to believe the lawn was as perfect as it looked. She paused. Made eye contact with people she'd known for decades. You all shook his hand every Sunday. I don't blame you. But now you know. She sat down. And then Tommy stood. My brother. 18. Thin. Still wearing the suit Marcus had picked out and the tie Marcus had measured. His hands trembling at his sides. The room turned to him. I'm Tommy, he said. His voice shook, but he didn't stop. I'm 18 and my dad hits me. My sister is telling the truth. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. He sat back down and I saw his hands gripping his knees under the table, white-knuckled, holding himself together. Then my mother stood. Catherine Sullivan. Who had spent 28 years sitting, standing, walking, breathing within the perimeter of what Marcus allowed. She stood up in the third row of a church fellowship hall in front of 200 people and said 6 words. I was silent too long. She's right. Then she pressed her hands to her face and cried. 3 people. 3 generations. And a room full of witnesses who could never unhear what they had just heard. Pastor David stepped forward. He stood at the side of the stage for a long moment, his hand on the back of a chair, looking at the floor. When he looked up, his face carried something I hadn't expected. Not shock, but shame. The quiet specific shame of a man realizing he'd been standing 3 feet from the truth and looking the other way. Marcus, he said. His voice was level, but the warmth was gone. I need to speak with the deacon board right now. Marcus tried once more. He reached for David's arm, dropped his voice to that intimate, reasonable murmur he'd perfected. David, listen to me. This is a misunderstanding. My family is going through a rough. Richard, Pastor David pulled his arm back. Not right now. The room shifted. Not all at once. Not a movie moment where everyone stands and claps. It was slower than that and messier. Some people stared at their plates. Some whispered to each other. A woman I didn't know, mid-50s, glasses, walked over to me and touched my arm. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I didn't know. Now you do, I said. I stepped off the stage and walked to Tommy. Took his hand. My mother followed. We left through the side door. And I didn't look back. 72 hours. That's how long it took for the life my father had built to come apart. 24 hours after the ceremony, the deacon board met. The vote to remove Marcus from his position was unanimous. Not a single voice in his defense. 48 hours, the 2 largest contracts Marcus's company depended on were cancelled. A $180,000 renovation. A $95,000 community center project. Both pulled with the same polite, devastating language. We feel it's best to go in a different direction at this time. 72 hours. Tommy and I drove to the county courthouse. We filed for a temporary restraining order. It included my medical records. The audio recording. A sworn statement from Tommy. The judge reviewed it in chambers. Not a dramatic courtroom scene. Just a tired woman in a small office reading through pages and listening to 4 minutes of audio on her laptop speakers. She granted the order before lunch. Marcus Sullivan was barred from coming within 100 yards of his wife, his daughter, and his son. He was ordered to vacate the house on Elmwood Lane. The house, it turned out, had both their names on the deed. My mother had been on the title since they purchased it in 1998. Marcus had acted like he owned it alone for 26 years. He didn't. He packed 2 bags and moved into a rental on the other side of town. The lawn on Elmwood was already getting long. The day after the restraining order was granted, Marcus walked into First National Bank and withdrew every dollar from Tommy's savings account. $38,000. Gone before the teller finished counting. He thought it was a punishment. One final act of control. If he couldn't own his family, he'd make sure his son paid for leaving. But my grandmother had planned for that. Your grandfather always said, never let a bully hold the checkbook, she told me over the phone. Her voice matter of fact. 5 years earlier, quietly, without telling anyone, my grandmother had opened a 529 education savings account in Tommy's name. $200 a month pulled from my grandfather's pension. $12,000. Not a fortune, but enough to keep the door open. And then something unexpected happened. The church did something I didn't anticipate. Within a week of the ceremony, a group of women from Grace Baptist organized a scholarship collection for Tommy. They passed an envelope at Sunday service. They posted about it on Facebook. They sent checks in the mail. By the following Sunday, $8,400. $12,000 from my grandmother. $8,400 from the community. A financial aid application that Tommy and I filled out on my kitchen table on a Tuesday night, eating takeout pizza on paper plates. It wasn't $38,000. It wasn't the golden path Marcus had dangled and yanked away. But it was enough. And the best part, Marcus's decision to drain the account became the final proof of who he was. The man who stole his own son's college fund out of spite. Even the people who'd been on the fence stopped defending him after that. The leash was cut. 2 weeks after the ceremony, I drove to the house on Elmwood. It was strange pulling into that driveway without the pickup truck taking up the whole width of it. The flag was still on the porch. The lawn was uneven. The wreath was last season's. My mother was in the kitchen, not cooking, just sitting at the table, looking out the window at the backyard where the grill still sat, uncovered, rusting at the legs. The house was quieter than I'd ever heard it. And for the first time, the quiet wasn't a warning sign. She didn't look up when I came in, but she spoke. "Do you forgive me?" I pulled out the chair across from her, sat down, looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw a woman I was still learning how to see. Not the villain. Not the hero. Just a person who had been afraid for so long that fear became her personality and silence became her language. "I don't know," I said. "And I don't need to know right now." Her face crumbled. "But you stood up," I said. "In that room, in front of everyone, you stood up. And that's the first step." I didn't hug her. Some part of me, the 10-year-old part, wanted to. The part that had waited in a dark bedroom for her to come back and say it wasn't your fault. But I wasn't that girl anymore. And pretending I was would have been a different kind of lie. So I just sat there beside her in the kitchen that used to feel like a trap. And now it just felt like a kitchen. We didn't say much. That was enough. A year later, the house on Elmwood Lane looked different. Not renovated. My mother didn't have the money for that. But the wreath was new. The lawn was mowed a little unevenly by Tommy when he was home on weekends. And the refrigerator, the same white Kenmore that had held my father's beer and my mother's leftovers for 20 years, now had a photo of Tommy on it. Grinning in a college sweatshirt, standing next to a girl I hadn't met yet. My photo was up there too. A selfie I'd sent my mother. Me in my scrubs after a 12-hour shift. Tired but smiling. She'd printed it at the CVS and stuck it next to Tommy's with a daisy magnet. It was the first time a picture of me had been on that refrigerator. I was 25. Tommy was doing okay. Not Harvard. Not the grand plan Marcus had weaponized. A solid community college near my grandmother's house. Engineering track. A part-time job at a hardware store that gave him an employee discount on tools he actually wanted. He called me every Thursday. We mostly talked about nothing. It was the best part of my week. My mother was in therapy. She'd gotten her driver's license, her first, at 50 years old. The day she passed the test, she sent me a photo of herself holding the card. And her smile was the most genuine expression I'd ever seen on her face. We met every other week for coffee. Some visits were good. Some were quiet. Some were hard. But they existed. And that was more than I'd had for 18 years. Marcus lived alone in a one-bedroom rental across town. He'd lost the deacon's seat. The contracts. The house. And the story he'd told himself about who he was. Some people still believed him, but fewer every month. He never apologized. I stopped waiting for him to. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. I'm not telling you this story to teach you something. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a life coach. I'm a nurse who works 60 hours a week and owns one nice pair of shoes. I'm telling you because for 18 years, I thought I was the problem. I thought that if I were quieter, softer, more careful, if I could just stop pushing his buttons, my father would stop hurting me. And the person who should have told me that wasn't true was standing right there the whole time whispering the opposite. So if anyone listening to this right now is sitting in a room where someone keeps telling you that you're the reason things are broken, you're not. You were never the reason. Silence isn't loyalty. Leaving isn't betrayal. And you never owe your image to someone who shattered yours. My mother was wrong for 18 years. But she was right once. The night she pressed record. And that one act of truth, late as it was, changed the course of 3 lives. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive her. Forgiveness isn't a light switch. It's not something you decide once and it's done. It's more like physical therapy. Some days you make progress. Some days it hurts more than the day before and you show up anyway because the alternative is staying broken. My name is Sarah. I'm 25 now. I still live in that studio apartment. I still have the IKEA curtains. And for the first time in my life, I don't flinch when my phone rings. That's enough. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. It helps more people hear it. And if you've got a story of your own, the comments are open. No judgment here.